Today we're going to ask the big question, which I mentioned on Monday, and that is, if the Building Better Humans project ceased to exist in all of its forms, what would go missing from the world? Because I understood that if I knew the answer to that, it would become our why.
Yeah, the Building Better Humans Project podcast. Welcome. Be motivated and be inspired. Let's go.
G'day team, Glenn Azar here. Welcome you back to the Building Better Humans Project podcast. You know, we've all heard about Simon Sinek's book about, if you haven't read it, we've most likely heard about it, understanding your why. And we talk about this all the time. When we understand why we do what we do becomes much more powerful. And so throughout the lockdown, the snap lockdown in Queensland, the question I asked myself on the weekend was around that. If the Building Better Humans project ceased to exist in any form, just did not exist, no podcast, no bro camps, no Ayala, no personal development, no Project 180, no nothing. It just ceased to exist. What would go missing from the world? And then the answer to that would be the why. Now, in searching for that answer, and the universe works in funny ways, I came across something that to me highly illustrated the why. And it's very random. It was on LinkedIn. I won't mention the person who posted it because I don't know them personally, although I have reached out, and then I'll make more sense to you in a moment. But the point is that obviously other connections of mine liked this status, and then that has therefore put it into my news feed, and it just happened to tie in to the answer to that very question in my mind. So for me, what goes missing if we lose the Building Better Humans project, particularly if it just ceased to exist, if it had never existed, not if people could remember it and they had lessons from it, if it just didn't exist, what would go missing? And what that was mostly was hope for our younger generation, and no doubt for our older generation as well, but hope. And that was about the fact that we teach young people hope, that there's something better around the corner. We help people with their, young people in particular, with their self-confidence, with their self-belief, with the understanding that they have some levels of control in their life. But hope was a big one, because I went out with Jay Nix to a school earlier this year. Went out to a couple of schools actually, and we talked to the teachers who look after different communities within their community, and just asked them, when do kids give up for these different communities? And there was an Islander, and who looked after all the Islander kids, and he said year 11 for our kids, they give up in year 11 because they say we're just going to drive forklifts in factories. That's what we do as Islanders. And then I asked the Indigenous woman about the Indigenous children, and she said for them it was year 9 because they say we're not even going to get jobs because they're from a lower socioeconomic tough area and they're Indigenous. And I remember leaving there feeling incredibly sad because what those children were actually missing was hope. They just didn't believe that there was anything out there for them. So once they go out to take their place in the world, it's to be at the bottom and to stay at the bottom, and there's no chance of ever changing that. What a terrible situation to find yourself in. So hope is a big one. But then flicking through LinkedIn, I came across this photo, and the photo was of a baby, maybe 2 or 3 years of age, with the hugest smile on its face, like young babies do, before the world's really had a chance to shape them in any way. And the piece that came with that from a lady in Melbourne was quite powerful. And I want to reach out, or I have reached out to this lady because I want to try and get her son onto bro camp, because I don't believe that psychology and counselling, etc., is the answer. Now, I believe it's a part of the answer. I'm not disrespecting these fields, obviously, because I'm studying psychology at the moment, and I've got some great friends who are psychologists, but I don't think it's the total answer. And I know because I went through a lot of psychology as a young man, as an angry young man, year 6, year 7, year 8, and I didn't connect. And so I needed people to meet me where I was at, and that wasn't happening back in those days. And I think we can do that with Bro Camp, and we can give them some control rather than be adults trying to delve back into the problems. But that's just my opinion, and I'm not open for a massive discussion around that. I'm not trying to upset anyone. It's just my opinion. So I have reached out. But there's this photo of this beautiful young baby, 2, 3 years of age. And this is what this lady wrote. She said, "Meet my son. He's 14 now. This is one of my favourite photographs. He doesn't laugh that much anymore. The darkness began to set in about 3 years ago. I smiled with friends as we talked about those challenging teen years. During the pandemic, he deteriorated. Looking back, it's easy to see. While happening, it was easier to miss, as everyone juggled the impacts of lockdown. His sleep became erratic, and when it came, it was interrupted. His appetite was gone, and he was unresponsive and distant. He became quieter and quieter, and broke down in March, telling me that he didn't want to live. The gift of having children was not to be mine until my 40th year, and I was overjoyed to welcome him, and then 2 years later his brother. His words will haunt me forever. Our doctor listened patiently as my son answered all of his questions. Finally, he said, "Kay, my opinion is that he is suffering with severe depression, but I can't help him as he's under 16. He wrote an urgent referral. This conversation happened on a Sunday. On Tuesday, I chased the referral. We are processing Friday's referrals. You'll hear from us soon. The call came on Thursday, an hour answering questions, deeply confronting questions. An appointment was set. The earliest one, 10 weeks away. It was hard to tell him. We agreed to be hopeful. We lived in a state of hyper alert. We slept when he slept, plating up meals to be heated later. I became good at compartmentalising while I worked and gave thanks for the circumstances that meant I was able to work from home. The appointment arrived, telehealth, as by now, Melbourne was back in lockdown. So much hope rested on this appointment. The two health professionals will never know the weight of expectation that we were projecting on them through the screen. At the end of the session, they confirmed his depression, advising that they could not take him on as a case as there was a 7-month-long waiting list, and were advised to return to our doctor for referrals to our mental health professionals. I heard a sob next to me. My son had tears rolling down his face. And in that moment, I realised that I too was crying. Everyone is doing their best, but the system is cracking beneath the strain. Our story is not unique. We are working hard to keep things as normal as possible, but our home remains in a state of hyper alert. We have brutally honest and confronting conversations every day. For the moment, his immediate family and close friends are his mental health team, but it is neither predictable nor easy to navigate. To support mental health, we have to talk about mental health every day. We have to notice changes and talk about them. We have to normalise discussions about mental health. People do recover, but they don't recover alone. How many people are in your ripple? Family, friends, colleagues. More and more, you will have the chance to be a part of someone else's mental health team. Are you ready? Are you willing? What is your ripple? So I read that after contemplating the question that what if the Building Better Humans project ceased to exist? What would be missing from the world? And this is exactly what would be missing from the world. It's hope. Now, I want to get in touch with this young man. As soon as borders are open, I want him up here on a bro camp. I want to make a difference. And I'm not the only one. I know there are people like Will Smith in Tasmania. There are people like Emerge up in Toowoomba. There are people trying their hardest to make this difference. We need to look at the human elements of what we do, of why we do what we do. And I look at that and I go, if you needed to find an incredibly powerful why as to why you do the Building Better Humans project, as to why you try and develop your team, as to why over the last couple of years, like all businesses, you've been kicked in the guts over and over, and the wind gets taken out of you, and the bank balance drops, and the neighbours complain about noise, and the landlord doesn't want to assist with any sort of rental assistance, and just these things keep piling upon you. Why do you keep getting up? Why do you keep going back and doing it again and again? And it's reading stories like that. It's the 513 young people that have so far come through Bro Camp and Ayala. Those are the reasons that I keep doing what I do. Those are the reasons that my team will keep getting up every time they're knocked down. And that is what we would be missing if we didn't have the Building Better Humans project, if it ceased to exist. And that's a pretty powerful question to ask, and I'm really glad I asked it. Anyway, team, hope you find some value in that and ask yourself some deep questions.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Building Better Humans podcast with your host, Glenn Azar. For feedback, to stay up to date, or go back and find an old episode, head over to 180.net.au. Yeah, the Building Better Humans Project podcast. Let's go.